So walk us through the mechanics of the kind of salami that we have made, that we would make, and that we have successfully made, and that we've unsuccessfully attempted. How do we do it?
Yeah. So I've always shot to make the same one. I stuff it in hog casings, which are what normal fresh sausage is stuffed in, which are of a smaller diameter than what most salami is put in. Most of them are put in beef middles or even bungs, or really big ones, which are beef intestines. And so it's a smaller sausage, which requires a shorter drying period, which is the tricky element here in the Pacific Northwest, is that aging period and the slow weight loss. And so I just season it with salt and pepper and wine, maybe a little bit of garlic.
Or fennel, I think I've seen you put in.
Yeah, I think I've done fennel before. And my whole goal is to pick the season to do it in, because I don't have a temperature humidity controlled environment. I must pick the salubrious season, the season conducive to slow fermentation and slow drying. And that is the tricky part. That is the hardest thing about making salami in this region. And so what I do is I salt it 2% by weight, and that's really the only thing you have to measure. That is the essential thing. And so I tend to make my salamis from leaner pork, not quite as fatty as the fresh sausage that we make.
Okay.
Because the lean meat is what has the water, and that is the more active realm of fermentation. And this is a ferment. It must ferment. There must be bacteria in there consuming sugars, creating acid.
We're not
just like any ferment. Yeah.
Because we're introducing oxygen by the grinding mechanism.
And bacteria. You're inoculating it with good and bad bacteria. And so you add salt at the exact ratio in order to give the good bacteria an upper hand. And you'll read several books about it, but the general ratio is no less 2% by weight of meat. So you weigh the salt. It's not by volume. You must weigh it because salts will have different volumes. Flaky salt as opposed to a fine sea salt. And so you got to weigh it as a portion of the total meat to guarantee that you're getting the proper amount. And so 2% is the minimum. That's the lowest end. You would not go below that. You would go up to 3% salt by weight. And that would give you an excellent salami. And you mix that really thoroughly with the leaner meat. And what the leaner meat does as you mix it is it creates, you've heard of the myosin conversion, where it binds things. So if you pour water, but you wouldn't necessarily do that. If you pour wine into it, it is completely absorbed and bound in the meat. And so it's totally distributed. There's something really awesome about salami, and it is that you're introducing the cure, so the salt and the wine, to every single, little tiny bit of meat, as opposed to a whole muscle cure where there are pieces that are untouched. So it's really just completely incorporated. And you mix it by hand really thoroughly so that there's no standing wine in the bottom of the container. And so that the salt is evenly distributed. And you get the stringies and the clingies. The meat almost becomes, it's getting on its way to a paste, further and further from resembling the little wormies that came out of the grinder when you first ground it. So it's really bound, all of that water, and all you're doing this whole time is you're creating hurdles for Clostridium botulinum and for other bad guys. And what those bad guys need are a high or low acidity, and you're achieving the acidity by the addition of the wine and by a quick ferment. That plunges the pH down below, ideally, 4.5. And you can do, some books will say 5.3. It's got to be below that. And I think it depends on when you measure it. I don't know. I go by smell. The smell of a tangy sausage is what you want, of tangy salami. And it's unmistakable. It's an unmistakable smell. And so the binding the addition of salt and wine is achieving that low pH. And then the other thing that the bad guys need is free water, available water, unbound water, puddled water, droplets, unclaimed molecules. And you claim them by the mixing, by the thorough mixing. All the water is bound. Meat can bind a lot of water when it undergoes that friction, and particularly with the addition of some salt and some acid, it even increases the emulsification, is the other word for it, the binding of it. And maybe emulsification, that has to do more with fat, but whatever. And so it's binding the water and making it unavailable. And the salt itself is binding water molecules and making it unavailable to the bad bacteria, which need it to proliferate. And so you've created acid, you've removed water, and they don't like that. Bacteria doesn't like that. And then in those conditions, you've mixed everything, you've thoroughly incorporated all of the salt, you've bound all the water, it's pasty, you stuff it into casings. And I stuff it into the hog casings. And I do little horseshoes, and I just leave the ends long with some slack so I can tie them together. And where, the loop meets and under my knot is I hang them on a wood rod up in my shop. So that's the shape they have. And you want to hang them first in a very warm place. You want them to inoculate. So we're talking like up to 80 degrees, hot, a hot place in the house. And usually when we're doing this, it's late spring, early fall, and we might just be starting to fire up the wood stove to heat the house. And so
late spring, you mean late fall,
winter,
early winter?
Yeah.
Late fall, early winter. I thought you said spring there.
Yeah, maybe I did. Not late spring, early spring, if anything. We're still trying to figure out because we don't live in Italy.
We've tried every season except summer.
It's hard.
Put it that way,
yeah. But so we have some control over the warmth, and you want them to sit in there for a couple days, like 2 days, at least overnight, and then stick your head in amidst them and smell, and you will smell the tangification occurring, which is the drop in the pH.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so this is our method. That's right. I'm telling everyone about our method. All right, then I bring it out into the shop. And ideally, if I've timed it properly, the shop is going to be in the 50s degrees Fahrenheit. And the humidity is going to be 80 to 95%, which is really high. And you would think in a place that gets as much precipitation as we do that there'd be no problem with that. That is not the case.
We have drier winters.
Yeah, our winters are bone dry. And even when we are getting rain, like if we'll be at 100% humidity in the shop. And I have a humidistat. It's just off the charts, but then the rain will stop for a minute and the clouds will break. And the humidity is just gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. It plummets. We're like at 20%,
Wow.
At least in the really volatile days in the spring, which happen to be kind of ideal in terms of temperature, but unreliable in terms of humidity.
Yeah.
So that is the juggling that I do with trying to cure salami here in the Pacific Northwest. And how long does it hang? I don't know, couple weeks, maybe 6 weeks, which is way more than a couple. And I just keep coming in and I feel it, and I want it to be dense. And I'll even just cut one and see what we're looking like in there.
Yeah.
And we might get some mold, hopefully. The mold is also another indication of acidification. If you get the white mold on the salami, it is a very good thing. That means the acidity is low. The pH is somewhere, down there at 4.5, 5.3 or something like that. And that is a good sign, so you want that. When I cut into them, I can always tell if it's a salami we can eat or not. Now, this is the other thing, that is rightly, warrants very draconian warnings about botulism. If you have the botulate toxin in a petri dish, you can't smell it, taste it. Like the lethal dose is so tiny that it is untastable and unsmellable, and you can't see it. So it is this invisible Trojan horse, the salami is. And if you eat it, you will die. And you won't No. Mm-hmm. So that is what that leads us to believe, the action of, the toxin in Petri dish. But really, all bacteria occurs in an ecology. So there are other signs accompanying it, even if they aren't a direct result of the progress of Clostridium botulinum from a spore to a toxin, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Clostridium botulinum can only do its thing if the acidity is not low enough. Mm-hmm. And if there's free and available water. And that will have other results in the salami that you will be able to detect. And so when I make salami in the way I've just described, just 3% salt by weight, no nitrites and no starter cultures, I do not eat salamis that are case hardened, which is a thing that happens when it is too dry, which is kind of a lot out here, when the humidity is not high enough. Which means that when you slice the salami and look at the cross section, the exterior will be dry, but the interior still just looks like completely raw, squishy, moist meat.
Yeah.
That is a disruption in the ecology. So I have no idea what's fermenting in there.
Yeah.
And so we can't eat those. Mm-hmm. They don't stink. They don't reek. Mm-hmm. Okay, truth be told, I have tried them before. And they don't actually taste good either.
Yeah.
So they're not horrible though. It's not like with whole muscle cures where if they go off, it's like honking of ammonia or a restaurant dumpster in the middle of this July. Like it's not that, but it is still not good. And it's clearly not right. It's a disruption. What you want is a homogeneous drying of the full cross section of the salami through the whole diameter. Mm-hmm. And that's very obvious when it happens, and it's beautiful, and it's sliceable, it's not squishy, and it tastes amazing. Yeah. It's just delicious. So that is how I've tried to make salami. Mm-hmm. And with, ups and downs. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and always the variable is the humidity. Yeah. That is the thing that I have the least control over here. And it's the hardest for me to predict when we will have that consistent humidity because I kind of need it for a long time. Yeah. I need it for 4 weeks at least to be 80 to 95% humidity, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Or, in the 50s, I would say 50 to 60. There's variation in there.